All right, y'all.
Let's check that our audio settings are all the way up. Um, hey.
So we wanted to get together just kind of like talk about what's happening in the world today, namely what's going on in Los Angeles County and fires and such, and how it intersects with our work, but also how it's impacting us as individuals and as staff. How's it impacting us as an organization and things of that sort. So yeah, does anybody have any opening thoughts, any opening feelings?
I want to say welcome to our first Insights and Reflections HJC team, or first HJC team Insights and Reflection time together. It's really interesting in these times because it's when our work has the most use, in that a lot of the practices that we facilitate or that we teach, or the skills that we're like bringing into to different spaces, come in handy when we're under duress, right? And um, we were blessed that the fires didn't come to our home, but we were under like evacuation warnings or getting alerts saying like, hey, and we like literally I could walk out the front door and see it looked like ambers, right? Like on the mountain, like that's how close. And I've heard from different people in our community like how much closer they were, right? Some of the people that I know. And how my nervous system got activated, right? And I was on alert, and my body was having a whole reaction to it as I continued to work, and then we lost power, and had to like logistical things like get ice or like figure out what we're going to do because we depend on the internet, right, to do our work. Deciding whether maybe we don't work, and what does that mean? So it's just a lot happening, a lot of decisions to be made, and also like feeling really sad for all those people who lost their homes and now are in these really hard predicaments and or are houseless, or yeah, so just sort of sitting with all of that, and managing my nervous system through it.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I think
I can go. Oh, go ahead, Catherine.
okay. I think my nervous system is going through different waves of like everything's gonna be fine. Oh my goodness gracious, what are we gonna do? And I think I want to just feel numb. Oh no, 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 we have to like come together because um I think if I think if we all go numb and say nothing, those that will make decisions for us might not consider what people need. And mm, that's what I'm going through, like back and forth of like 1 minute, how do I protect myself? How do I protect my family? How to protect my loved ones and all that stuff. And then also like I just want to hide under a rock and
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you, Catherine, for sharing. Carla, do you want to share?
Yeah. For me, I am out of the country. So for I guess for folks that are not hearing, you guys know this, but um I'm not physically there, but yet I I feel like I went into panic a little bit and was like texting and I would erase my text messages and then go back and forth and like not because I didn't want to project what I knew I was panicking, right? So I didn't want to project that. And so I kept on writing, going back and forth and like trying to act like relaxed about it, but my body was on very high alert. And it I felt scared and worried and concerned because I wasn't physically there, so I couldn't like contribute to help or like really see like what's happening, right? I just felt like in the dark and like it felt lonely, but yet I felt guilty because I'm like, what? I thought I'm supposed to be grateful I'm not there, but I'm worried about the people that I care for, and just as a community, like what? Like I don't know, it just seemed very unreal. Like I've always heard of these things like on the news or like extended people, no one really near me. And so not that that makes it any less, but to a certain extent when you haven't like actually lived something like that, I think that it impacts a little bit different. Um and so yeah, I definitely had a lot of emotions and had to like step back, take a couple deep breaths, and intentionally, like not respond. Oh, I think I froze. Give me one sec. I'm hoping you heard
Yes.
what
Yeah.
I said. Okay, great. But anyway, I lost my train of thought because I saw that I froze. But anyway, if somebody else wants to share a little bit more, that's how I felt in the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear everybody's kind of experience. I think what it highlights for me is kind of like the differences in experience that we all have based on like our past or our expectations or our worries. Like when we first moved to Duarte in San Gabriel Valley, there was during COVID in summer there was some fires in the foothills, and we were under evacuation warning back then, and back then we were renting. So there was some concern because I lived in Long Beach for like 25 years, and like mountain fires and wildfires and forest fires were never a concern for me. So then just having that initial experience, that first experience, it was scary and nerve-wracking, just the thinking about having to pick up and leave. This time, several years later, I think I didn't have as much of a visceral reaction to it until it like until it gets close. But I think I have a lot of feelings around the folks that are impacted and the devastation that's happening. I just have a lot of worry, concern, and we like now we have this home that's ours, and because of circumstances surrounding like our insurance, and that created a lot of fear about what if the fires did reach down here and they did impact our home. We would lose everything. We would lose everything, and so that was a worry and a concern, but there was not much that we were able to do about that. So there is a mixed feelings. I didn't have as much fear or concern about the fires as much as I did the first time around, as much as I do just, I think I just have worry and uh, concern, but also the helping part is something that came up for me. Like we at HAC, like like it's just us. We're a small organization, and we're still trying to stay above water, fiscally and financially. And so that means that we have to still to do some work in order to keep things going. And so there is a lot of guilt around having to do that and not being or making ourselves available to help in other ways that some of these other organizations are able to do. And so we don't have the funds to be able to support folks with like resources and things like that. So there's a lot of guilt, and I don't know, like sort of like conflict, internal conflict as to like, should I be working or should I be out there volunteering? Like, how am I helping, and how do we help? And so there's more of that for me. Was what does that look like, you know? And so yeah, I do have some guilt even now. It's like, because sitting here talking about it, and it's like, well, okay, well, I can be out there volunteering at some place, or helping out some way, and yet there's this reliance and dependence on my salary to continue to survive. Uh, and so I'm also, but I'll also like, I've also had a lot of like gratitude and feelings of like just being blessed, to be able to have safety and security. When we lost power, that was also like, oh my God, it's like we have to make all these pick up and go, like staying in the office just so that we have electricity, things of that sort. So it was a lot. It's been a lot, I think. Yeah.
Ditto. As far as it being a lot and having to figure out where to go get power and how to deal with all those things and the fear of loss, right? And we didn't experience loss. I can only imagine the people that are, you know, staying with family or who don't have family locally and have to find shelters or don't, you know, and you know, I've gotten a different list of resources which I'm hoping we can compile and we'll be sharing out. But I was looking at them, and in some places, you know, they're overwhelmed. They're not able to provide, right, more additional, like there's limited services for shelter and all of that. It's a little bit scary. But what did come up for me is like, as it intersects to with our work, this is when it's important to understand that even though it's let me reframe that. In these times of emergency, we all have different ways our survival brain will react. Some of us will shut down and like numb out and like be very like, all right, you know, other people will like go into their flight, you know, like just, you know, and otherwise we'll go into fight, right? And even all of that looks different, right? Like I was having like, okay, how come we don't have our emergency kit ready, blah, 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 like where do we go, what do we need? And I would go from like that fight to kind of numb, like, well, like even if I get all that together right now, what would that matter? Like the back and forth, right? Or, you know, argue, like some people just shut down, the people that don't evacuate, that are just like, you know, and we might judge them or criticize them for not doing the things that we think they should be doing, but we actually don't know what they were experiencing. We don't know what their circumstances are. So it's so important for us to stay in that place of curiosity and support and not go into judgment and criticism for whatever choice people make, because we don't know, right? We don't actually know what was happening for them in their nervous system and how they've experienced, how they've managed struggles in the past, right? Or what their life has been like and why, you know, they react the way they react. So yeah, I think that for me, that's important to remember, because otherwise we're like, well, they got the warning, why didn't they get out, you know? Or, you know, like when I could be harshly critical about is those freaking insurance companies canceling last minute, right? Anyway, that's a whole different conversation to have, but it does really suck where the bottom line has to do with money, you know. How like keeping ourselves safe and supporting oftentimes has to do with money. Yeah. Anyway,
I was curious, like how is everybody, like we do in our work, we talk a lot about like not just reflecting on what you're feeling and what's going on in your nervous system, but it's like, how are you regulating? How are you taking care of yourself during this time? And I know like we're far removed from other people's experiences that are more directly impacted, but I also wonder is like, you know, like what resources, like there's all these resources like food, shelter, water, all this stuff, but like where are the emotional and the psychological resources? And I wonder what, like, what's the resources people have available to them during these times of disaster. But curious, like, how are you all taking care of yourselves?
For me personally, I've been doing a lot of more breath work, a lot more self-talk, like kind of being present where I'm at so that I know that I'm not in immediate danger so that I could like sort of recalibrate my brain and not get stuck in my amygdala. Yeah, I think that's been, and try to stick as close to like my routines and my goals, so I don't get overwhelmed. I think that those are the things I've been practicing, like being more present in my body.
Just for the folks that may be actually listening to this, is like, what does that mean, not get stuck in your amygdala?
In my survival brain, so like, when we are experiencing stress or we're experiencing a challenging time, there's a part of the brain that's in charge of making sure that we're safe, making sure that we survive. That's the part of the brain that decides if we're gonna fight, we're gonna flight, or we're gonna freeze. Or I mean, we could go into other strategies like what is it, like the befriend, the fawn, right? So in a survival moment, we have to react, and we might not need to logically think or reason. We just need to react in order to survive a bear attack or a car accident or one of the really traumatizing event. But sometimes when we get really stressed or we get scared, we go into that place and we get stuck there, and we get stuck with all the physiological reactions of being like surviving an attack or surviving and we're actually not in that immediate danger, right? We don't need that reaction. We don't need the physiological reaction in that moment, but our body still thinks it is, right? And when we're stuck in that place, it's hard for us to reason, use logic. It's hard for us to manage our emotions, to be able to calm down. Our body's not like our physiological, like our organs and all that are not processing optimally. And so by taking things like doing breath work, by shaking, by being more present in our body, we kind of recalibrate our brain to operate optimally and not get stuck in that place of survival in a physiological level, right? You might still be surviving this whole event and this whole experience, right? We might still have to go through all these processes, but we could do it from a fully calibrated brain. And with access to the different parts of our brain. So I hope that was, like, I try to do it as summarized as I could. Yeah.
That's good, thanks. So yeah, so Carla or Catherine and Jill, like, want to share how y'all are dealing with your emotions and your thoughts?
Yeah, I can go first if that's okay with you, Catherine. Yeah. I literally sat down on my bed and I first kind of analyzed like all my emotions, and I kind of I validated them. I said, these are just natural reactions. It's normal. It's okay that I'm feeling this way. And I just sat there for a couple minutes and accepted what was going on in my body. This was after all the texting. And then I said, like, okay, I think it's normal that I'm feeling this way. And I took 3 deep breaths, and it was late at night. And so I was going to bed, and I took 3 deep breaths, and I kind of laid back, and I just sat there like in quiet peace. The lighting was dimmed, and I allowed myself to be in that space. And then the next morning, what I did is like, okay, what I need right now is routine, or I need to kind of like not sink into like a sadness. And so I worked out. I made sure to take an extra 15 minutes to just stretch. I have a hard time meditating sometimes. So what I do instead is I started stretching, and so that made my body less tense. Um, and that's been helping me, and just take deep breaths as I'm doing the stretches. Because I feel like I hold a lot of my fear and in my body, and so I tense up. And so I need to do stretches or even work out to like release that and just give my body a break. Um, and if my body doesn't feel that tense, then I can focus more on what I'm processing in my mind and be a little bit more intentional. But if my body feels so tense, then I tend to block myself. So I just kind of wanted to go down through it. I was thinking like, what did I do? And you know, sometimes I feel like when you're not used to putting these things into practice, when somebody explains it to you, you're just like, but what do I do? Like, I don't get it. Like, at least for me, at first when I started, it was hard for me to understand what that really meant, or like how to implement it for myself personally. And so I just wanted to give a little breakdown of all of my steps. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, Carla. And I know that Catherine, you're gonna go next. I just wanted to really note that because I think that's important. That often we think it's gonna be this big thing that we do, right? This huge like outside of us or go to or like, versus like actually it's like all those minor little the consistency and like repeatedly that make a difference for us, right? Like even the unconscious things that we do. Anyway, yeah.
I agree with that. Those small things that we do, but they're full of intention, they can make really great lasting impact. Um, the way I've been taking care of myself emotionally is I would say breath work really helps me the most. As in the moment, like I'm sitting, I need to take a deep breath and I'm feeling frustrated and it helps calm me. Um, but for these circumstances, um, it felt like I couldn't rely only on that when usually that's like what helps me. So I got to explore more of what will help me. So, always exploring those emotions and those needs. So actually I want to say yesterday I went on a walk and I could only walk for like 10 minutes before I needed to go back home and it was just overwhelming like the air quality right now.
Yeah.
I had a mask on and everything, and it still was too much for me. And that made me sad of like, wow, I'm usually when if I can't do my breath work, then going out to do something physical really calms me down. And so I felt like, oh no, my go-tos are not, you know, they're not that I can't use them right now. And
Mm.
so last night I got my journal out, dusted off the pages, and just wrote how I was feeling. And the way I write is um in like a just brain dump, and felt like could have something I felt like I could like bury through like what was going on with me. And so that was a relief to feel that way. And I still want like connection with people. But it feels almost hard to ask for that because we're all responding to this differently. And so it also feels like an opportunity for me to hold space for others, you know? So that part is something I'm still seeking.
I appreciate you naming that, Catherine, the part around sometimes the tools that we have to regulate and to calm our nervous system or to be more present are not always available to us. Like right now for people that usually go for a run or a hike. Then at least for those of us who are near where the fires are at, or I mean, the fires are so big that there's a lot of us near the fires right now or affected by the air quality. Those are tools that are not available. And so having different kind of tools and you know, like practicing different things that would support is important, right? And so
You know, Susanna, you talk you have talked a lot about the importance of mourning, right, in the process of or grieving is another word that you've used in just the healing process or the self-attunement process. And it comes in different forms, like the grieving, like you said, like, oh, so grieving just the fact that you can't go for a walk or you can't go for a run or you can't, you know, be outdoors in nature or in a hike, especially if you're in one of the impacted areas, you know, all that is grief and loss. And there's like me not being directly impacted by the fires, and it almost inhibits me to want to express like what I'm feeling and maybe what my griefs are, because they're nowhere near to the degree that the people that are actually like losing their homes and being displaced and losing their communities, and like it's not to that degree. And that is a lot of grief and a lot of mourning that's going to take place. But like whatever loss that I have almost seems inconsequential or insignificant in comparison to that. And so therefore I almost feel like, you know, who am I to even be able to share that, who, because there's people that are a lot worse off than I am. And just the recognizing that fact, I think is kind of like soothing for me, because like you said, people are in different situations and people are having experiences, their own experiences. And one of the things that we teach is honoring that experience, regardless of what it is or how big it is or how small it is or whatever, like not judging that experience and being accepting of it. Um, and and so then there's the self-compassion piece, like me having guilt, me having like, oh, my experience is insignificant to others, being able to just recognize that and then just doing my breath work or doing my meditation and having self-compassion for that guilt, is I think is it's what's helping me, because I wish I can just drop everything and go directly help, and I can't, right? And even fear of saying this out loud and publicly and being ridiculed or being criticized because of my position. And because like for example, like I've had people reach out to me personally because I haven't been outspoken about like what's happening in Palestine, right? And um, and I've been criticized for not saying anything. And so now I feel the same thing with this. If you know I shouldn't say anything, who am I to say anything? Because I'm not being directly impacted by the fires to that degree, and so I should just shut up, right? And but it's also that guilt that prevents us from actually just voicing what we're feeling and what our experiences. I mean, like Carla's in another freaking country and she was like nervous and to some degree having an emotional experience about her concern for her loved ones here in the States, right? So we need to honor that even though she's not directly impacted, and that's just her experience and it doesn't make it any less than, right?
and we're experiencing, there's different levels of experience, but at the end of the day, we are experiencing this threat as a community, right? We're experiencing these losses and these changes and these, you know, like the access to all these resources or not having access to these resources as community, right? And so reminding ourselves that grief and mourning also comes in community, and us creating spaces for people to be able to even text us and receive messages from us, or all of that is an impact on us, right? Different kind of impact and different kind of consequences, but ultimately as a community, like it's important for us to recognize that it does have an impact on everybody involved, everybody, whether it's because it could be happening, you're experiencing yourself, your threat of experiencing, or you know of it, right? Like,
or even a
it's all,
past trauma, I would say.
yeah,
I would add,
past traumas that get
because that's
activated.
what was like so scary for me, because I know how hard displacement was for you specifically as Susanna. And
Mhm.
so my first thought was like, oh my goodness, if she loses her home, like she just bought her house, like I think that that's why I was so like in panic. But I was just fearful of what that meant emotionally and physically, but emotionally was like my first thing, like, oh no, I don't want her to go. Like I knew how hard that would be on both of you. And
Yeah.
so you just never know. It could be triggering from a past trauma as well, which is what
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah,
I was
for
getting at.
sure. That's part of what I was saying. Like, you know,
Yeah.
my nervous system was totally activated, and I had to do a lot of work so that my choices were not coming from that place, yeah, like that activation, and I could be more reasonable and logical about things. And I mean, we could go have another hour about like our attachment to things, like, you know, and all of those, all of that as well, right? And so, um, but I think this is a good place for us to come to a closing. This is meant where, you know, this year we want to practice talking and sharing about the experiences and our experience doing this work. And so this is our first insights and reflection. This is our raw conversations. We wanted to be as real as possible what it means to be doing our work and be human and be faced with these experiences out in the community. So we weren't expecting to start with doing it with winds and fires and, you know, like catastrophe in such a local way, but here we are. So thank you all for your willingness to be vulnerable and sharing, and also thank you all for listening to our experiences.
Yeah, I think it's one thing if we were all just like individuals and we're having this conversation, but we're a small nonprofit, right? And so I think about, because part of our work is to try to be able to impart onto other advocates and organizers and nonprofits the skills to be able to take care of themselves, to build resilience, to heal from trauma, so that when they're doing their work, they're not being impacted by vicarious trauma and stress and all this other stuff, right? They're not burning out. And so the reason, like one of the reasons why I think it's important for us to have these talks is because we are a small nonprofit. And so how are we putting into practice what we preach while these really huge life events and community events are going on? And just like hopefully some of the other conversations that we have are just, how are we doing as workers, as staff, as a community that is trying to help others in advocacy and stuff like that. And I think that's what I appreciate about what we're doing, because you really don't hear anybody else doing this stuff or talking about what that real world experience is. Like right now, I feel meh. I don't like, I'm not feeling lively. I'm not feeling motivated. I'm not feeling, and yet I still have to come to work and I still have to do the work. And so how do we honor our individual personal selves while we're doing the work. I think it's part of what I hope that others get from us having these conversations in public. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
Catherine, Carla, you want to have any do you have any closing thoughts or reflections?
I think what I would like to say is, if we like diminish our grief and we, say, oh, we should be grateful for what we have because people lost more. It's also another form of avoidance, it's also another form of repression of suppressing our emotions, and then
Mm,
it'll just build inside. And one day when it can't contain itself, because pain demands to be felt, it will manifest in ways that you might not be able to stop, like illness, you know. So I hope that people can hear our conversations and perhaps give themselves more grace for the grief that they might have.
mm.
Continued cycles of oppression too, right? Like that is ways that cycles of oppression continue. Thank you, Catherine, for that.
Yeah.
I don't have anything additional.
All right,
I
no
love what
worries.
everyone shared.
Cool. All right, well, I guess we'll just stop it there. Again, if you're watching this, listening to this, and just take care of yourself, hold compassion, and well wishes for the people that are being directly impacted by the fires. Do what you can, and don't feel guilty if you can't. Um, just holding them in your thoughts and your prayers and in your hearts, I think is doing something. Even if you can't physically be there to help someone out, but yeah, we will get through this hopefully as a community. And in order to do that, we need to be able to stay present and stay with ourselves, be attuned, and take care of ourselves. So in case others do need us, we're ready and there for them.
Yeah.
So thanks again, everyone. Be well. Wishing all the best to the people that are directly impacted and the folks that are helping out. Thank you so very much for dedicating your time, for sharing your time, and just sharing yourselves to help others. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you.